The festive season almost upon us. We're all hoping this year COVID won't cancel Christmas. The infection number's very low, but currently on level 1 of the lockdown. But just last week we heard from Professor Tulio de Oliveira that the reproduction number has moved above 1, which means roughly each person who has COVID is giving it to more than one person. In other words, the numbers are, it seems, starting to creep up. On the positive front, of course, more and more people are opting to vaccinate. Well, let's get the latest from Professor Koleka Mlisana, co-chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19. Professor, thank you for your time. So today's figures, 312 new cases, sadly 10 deaths. But we know that the scientists and the doctors look over 7 days, look at the averages. What is the 7-day story telling you about COVID? Are we starting to climb again?
Good evening, Sally, and thank you for having me, and good evening to all the viewers. Where we are right now, you are correct actually in saying we're beginning to see the numbers creeping up, and it definitely then becomes a cause for concern. Because if, for instance, we look at the numbers that are becoming positive, but most importantly as well, we look at the percentage test positive, which means of all those that are tested for that particular 24 hours, how many are positive and what percentage is that? So if we look at the previous weeks, really, I think from around the 10th of October, we have actually been having less than 2% positivity rates. And what we have seen in this recent end of the week, which is the week 46, we have seen an increase of up to 2.3% positive. Now, that means there is a definite increase on the numbers that are testing positive. And this has been seen to be much higher in the Gauteng province. In fact, with Gauteng, we're sitting at around 4.3%. So, which means, and in fact, even looking at absolute numbers, we can see that in Gauteng. Now, what we have also looked at, and there was a lot of communication today trying to understand where are these numbers coming from. And so what is emerging is that in Gauteng, we're actually seeing this in the Tshwane district, especially, in the TUT, and because we saw that this was happening in the younger age groups, so it looks like we're getting these clusters around the Tshwane area. The good thing is the fact that we're able to identify where the so-called hotspots are, It therefore allows us to zoom into those areas and get a better understanding.
Sorry, I just missed. What did you say? Which areas in Tshwane did you say?
So the TUT, which is the Tshwane University of Technology.
Interesting.
Yes. Yes, but also actually other areas have also included Hatfield, in Soshanguve, Archersville, Mamelodi. So we're beginning to see more, positive numbers in those areas, which means we need to take a closer look.
Yeah, as you say, it's important that you've identified those hotspot areas. The test positivity rate, 2.3% nationally, but higher in Gauteng, 4.3%. Talk to me about the reproduction rate as well, because that is another measure that you use. What's that on? Is that still over 1?
Yes, so far it still is. And I mean, as you correctly said earlier on, I mean, Tulio, had already said once it is above 1, then it means one person who's infected is likely to transmit to more than just one individual. And that's when we really get, we want to be, we get concerned, because then it means there's an increase in transmission rates. Now coupled with that, sorry, Sally. I was just going to say, coupled with that, obviously, these are just we're seeing cases, increasing number of cases. Now, there are obviously a lot of other factors, because we're in a different phase of the, pandemic in the country, in that we have seen a reasonably increased rates of seroprevalence, in that people who have either had an infection or have been vaccinated. So there's a level. In fact, we know now that more than 60% seroprevalence is in the country, which therefore should provide some level of protection. So even though we might see the number of cases, we do know that with vaccinations and with past infections, then the number of admissions to hospital should be reduced. And so whilst we are concerned with this increased number of cases, what's going to be important is for us to monitor people who are getting hospitalized.
All right, so that is quite hopeful that obviously vaccinations have occurred and the general levels of infection and immunity in the population is at around 60%. So can you say to me conclusively tonight that beaches will stay open, that Christmas will not be cancelled in any way this year?
No, definitely. There's no way I could say that. I'm sure you know that as well.
Of course I do.
I guess, the point that becomes critical is that, we have got this information, we've got this close monitoring, but the responsibility comes back to us as South African citizens. In that, for me, really, I'm saying right now, we should be saying, everybody, make sure you are vaccinated, because really for you to have lower chances of getting severe diseases if you are vaccinated. Yeah. And the other very effective method, prevention method that has now been proven is, wearing a face mask. And so really it's going to come back to us how we behave. Yes, fair enough, from the scientific evidence, we are also monitoring to see what are we, what is the virus looking like. So there's a very close monitoring of sequencing to see whether, is there a looming variant that's coming. And we are now zooming in specifically in the Gauteng where the infections are higher, because then we really don't want to be faced with a new variant. We don't know yet. So really at the end of the day, if we want good Christmas, let's make sure we vaccinate and let's make sure we wear masks, and also don't get into crowded areas. Yeah, I can't promise you anything beyond that.
All right. I know you said earlier that you've had a lot of discussions today trying to crunch the numbers, understand where those hotspots are. What is the very latest modelling telling your team about when the fourth wave is likely to officially begin?
Actually, to be honest, Sally, we're just waiting for the report from the modelling team. But we know that really they're usually able to actually predict within a few, say in 2 weeks' time. So if we're looking at what is happening right now, apart from just the modelling team, there are other indicators that are beginning to emerge as well. In fact, what we are also noticing now is when we're looking at the, when we do the PCR test for cases that are positive, we basically measure the viral load, okay? And what we're beginning to see is that when the transmission is low, the viral loads of those that are infected is usually low as well. And when something is about to happen, we see a small increase in the viral loads, and we're beginning to see that. What we measure in the lab is what we call a cycle threshold in the test that we do. And what we're now beginning to see is that those CT values are starting to come down, which indicates that the viral loads are increasing. And we have seen in the previous waves that when we start to see that decline, that's when it means there's a high level of virus that's circulating, and therefore the chances of then increasing the number of cases is almost certain. So apart from the modeling, there's also now we're watching on this the general viral loads. And what's even interesting now, we're even able to measure the virus in wastewater, and that also is assisting in predicting. So there are various techniques and measurements that we're looking at that are predicting what's likely to happen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us the very latest. We do appreciate it. Professor Koleka Mlisana, co-chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19. The numbers are starting to creep up, particularly in areas of Gauteng, around student areas such as Hatfield, Soshanguve and Tshwane University of Technology, high viral loads as well. So this is not something we can ignore.
It's not something I wanted to hear ahead of the festive season. So hopefully more people vaccinate and actually try to stay away from crowded areas.